Give him two
But
lips
also,
of roses
Homeboy's
and
vibe
clover.
is just like,
And that his lonely nights are over.
you having fun.
Go. I'm done. I had to finish the verse.
Hello,
Hello.
I'm Maxie,
Hello, I'm Carolyn.
and this is Mutable Immutables, the show where we quibble queerly.
We exchanged pleasantries too.
We also sometimes take month-long unannounced breaks, but you know what? Shit fucking happens. And when it fucking rains, I swear to God. Ugh. How have you
Okay,
been?
in full trans in full transparency to our listeners, Max and I had to debrief for about an hour because, Max has had a bad month and I have had a bad day. So that's where we're coming from. Um, but now I'm better now that I am not waiting on roadside assistance for 4.5 hours.
Yes, and I am
Um,
finally in my new apartment. And I won't go into the full story with y'all because I'm not going to burden you with all that. But suffice it to say, it was comically, farcically bullshit. All of the shit that happened to me. But it's over
everything
now. It's in the
happened.
past. Everything fucking happened. It was a fucking
Yes.
nightmare. Anyway, but we're not here to talk
Oh
about
my
that
gosh.
today.
So yeah. Um
What are we here
so
to talk
yeah,
about?
we are talking about gay shit. Call me Michelle Visage cuz
Hmm.
do you want more gay shit? Head over to mutableimmutables.com.
Click the like button, subscribe, leave a comment. Yeah.
Yes.
So we are the last episode, we had done a brief intro into what we are calling our city series, which is going to be a series of several different mini arcs or mini series about gay history and gay culture in different cities. And we are going to start with New York, which we did a little bit of an intro for last time. But tonight we're going to start to actually get into some of the, I guess, nitty gritty, some of the actual details and events and facts and stuff. Um, but remember, we are not historians, so please don't cancel us in the comments because you can leave comments on podcasts, right? Is that a thing?
What?
I don't fucking know. I don't know.
Okay.
Listen,
Um
I've been dissociating for 2 weeks. I don't know how to do
okay.
this anymore.
Okay. Okay. All right. Okay. So, yes, like Max said, we sort of started last week talking I don't I think our time period is like 1890s to like the end of the Great
Mm-hmm.
Depression. So like 1941, like yeah. Um yeah, cuz I don't really want to talk about World War II because it did a lot for uh gay culture regarding gay culture. So we will talk about it another time. This time we're going to talk about New York City. And so last week we talked about kind of the three main neighborhoods. Uh, let's see. So Harlem, obviously, Greenwich Village, and what was that?
What?
Not the Bowery. I think it's Lower East Manhattan. Please hold. Oh, Times Square. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, Harlem, Greenwich Village, Times Square. Jesus Christ.
Because Times Square historically was absolutely not the Times Square we know today.
No. And we'll sort of briefly mention it, but so a lot of what we're talking about today is gonna have to do with is gonna take place in Harlem a lot, a couple of things in like Greenwich Village, and then just kind of all up and down lower Manhattan to what's it Midtown? I don't know. I don't know New York geography, but I'm doing my best, and Max has helped me to catalog some of the important locations that we'll talk about,
I feel like you will
which I
know New
appreciate
York
very
geography
much.
by the end of this, though.
Yeah, I mean, it's a grid system, motherfucker. Uh, can't remember who made that joke. I think that's a John Mulaney joke, actually. Yikes.
Oop.
Okay, so we sort of have already talked about a little bit how prohibition moved the movement forward, kind of when things went underground, and then everybody had to go underground to party because alcohol was illegal everywhere. And so this meant that kind of not just like I'm gonna say straight people, but what I mean by that is people who are not involved in the gay world, because we also talked last week about how the closet metaphor didn't really exist until the 60s. It was more of like you lived in the straight world and then you could move to the gay world and you could kind of bounce
Right.
between, or you could always live in the gay world. Right.
And this was
Um,
also
so,
this a lot of I think a lot of what we end up touching on and a lot of the history that's out there is more about gay men and not as much about the lesbian side of things because
of
contextual
course,
standards were
yes.
just different.
Right. Yeah. Women, I mean, we were back home with the kids, barefoot and pregnant. So,
Yep.
yes, most of this does not include gay women. Um, yeah. But we will talk about gay women now because we're going to talk about the 30s. Woohoo. So progressive.
Ooh,
Um,
pants.
Actually, bloomers, that's a good place to start, actually. Bloomers were a very important part of the women's lib movement in the mid 1800s. Um, so bloomers being like the super poofy, like pants, basically. And
Hmm.
women would adopt this, like, they called it a Turkish dress, where you would wear these kind of like billowy pants and then a dress that was like a little higher than the floor, like it was sort of cropped. And this was like the first introduction to women wearing pants. So this obviously did not help with the image of like suffragettes being lesbians and masculine women and all that stuff.
Hmm.
But yeah. Anyway, women wearing pants. That's where we're at.
Fuck yeah.
That was like the mid 1800s when we were wearing pants occasionally by now. Um, okay, so I am going to start with lodging houses, otherwise known as rooming houses. If you'll remember, in this time period, we had quite the surge of immigration, and so at this point, New York is kind of filled with not single working men, some single working men, but also like a lot of men who have left their families overseas. Um, we are also getting to the point of the and we'll talk about this more with the Harlem Renaissance, but we're getting into the Great Migration at this point, where economic conditions were so bad in the South. Obviously, and slavery has just been outlawed, that so many people who were sharecroppers moved up north for better opportunities, and a lot of people landed in uh, these particular areas. So that's where we're at, lodging and rooming houses. So according to one statistic, 61% of gay men in this particular New York jail had lived in a lodging or a rooming house, while others lived with family or boarded with others. And like many statistics about this sort of thing during this time period, census data doesn't really exist. So police arrest and jail data is all we have. So that'll be a recurring theme we'll see over and over again, where it'll be like we know this place was popular because of arrest records, uh, that sort of thing. So these buildings, they're apartment buildings, but from my understanding, it's not like apartments like that I live in now. It's more like a big house with lots of rooms. So there's not a lot of physical privacy, but it's like a rent by the week situation. So obviously it's perfect for transient workers, especially like unmarried men who are just like kind of bopping along. Uh, at this point, many had just come back from World War I and needed work. And of course, we had just had this wave of immigration, and so there's a fuck ton of people living in New York City, uh, like working, because obviously the city's developing super quickly, and then they have to have somewhere to live, so all these rooming houses start popping up, where like a landlady will own this apartment building and just rent out the individual rooms. Um,
Now, quick question, because I don't remember all of my history. This particular wave of New York immigration, was this more, because we're talking like 1920s, 1930s. So was that more, it was like Irish and
before.
maybe Polish?
Oh, sure, yeah, like plenty of like Italian immigrants at this time. I guess I'm talking about like sort of early 1900s, even before the war.
Oh,
And
okay.
eventually, I should have written this down. Eventually, they put limits on immigrants, which heyo.
Love that.
Um, but yeah, they ended up putting uh caps, I guess, on how many people could migrate to the country. Uh, but yeah, so lots of workers, lots of people in these apartment buildings. There's not a lot of physical privacy because you have your own room, but it doesn't open to the outside or anything. Like you're in a house together. So since there wasn't the physical privacy, people sort of just developed this culture where you mind your business. Could
Hmm.
you imagine? Uh, so even the landladies, like people just looked the other way. People ate and socialized outside of the building, but looked the other way when tenants had guests of the same sex over, or went to other people's rooms. Some of the landladies just didn't care. Some of them just needed the money. So it's not like these are revolutionary landlords or anything here. They're just, they need tenants.
Yep.
So,
And
um,
that's like very much just kind of city culture that you see today, like regardless of what city you're in. Like, I live in Seattle and we have the reputation of like the Seattle freeze, where the locals don't really like to talk or engage with each other. But like that's not unique. Like
unique.
when you live in a really, yeah, exactly. When you live in a really crowded space with a lot of people around you, you just don't care. You don't have the energy to care about like,
Yeah,
what other people are doing, and who
you
they're
got your
bringing
own
into their
shit to deal
rooms or
with.
whatever. However, uh sometimes people do care, especially if those people have maybe a strong quote unquote sense of morality or whatever, especially when it's a business. And so um, in these situations where these week by week tenants were coming in, they're bringing in same sex guests, or just getting up to whatever they were getting up to. um, there was some moralist backlash that arose from that situation. And so that kind of thing happens all the time. Like, a lot of people don't give a shit, but a couple people do. And unfortunately, the couple people who do give a shit usually are able to raise a big enough stink that it draws attention that doesn't really need to be there. But unfortunately, action usually does need to be taken to, make these town criers shut the fuck up. Um, and so in these situations, um, you know, with like total strangers, just like mixing and mingling with each other, and just kind of the transient nature of the whole thing. Um, it eventually, they set up hotels for workers to kind of, I guess, like separate from I guess the true tenants or
The
whatever. I
debauchery.
don't really know. Yeah, doesn't really make all that much sense to me, and I doubt it did to them either. But like Carolyn said, sometimes
I think it was
landlords
just.
just needed to get paid.
I think it was supposed to like they were gonna market it as like nicer like apartments for workers or
Yeah.
whatever. But it's serving the same exact purpose as the lodging houses were.
Yeah. I mean,
So
you rent hotel rooms by the night, but it's like the same purpose, so
yeah, I mean, I
um
feel like doing weekly hotel rooms used to be like a lot more common too. So like it was probably the same exact situation, just
yeah.
in different buildings.
And so a couple of these lodging houses were set up to kind of serve that purpose. One of which was the Seamen's Church Institute. That's Seaman spelled SEA. Um but I mean, seamen just as an idea, super gay. You've seen what they wear? That's gay.
We'll get into
Anyway,
the sailors.
so the Seamen's Church Institute was a residential and social facility that was intended to be used by sailors, because there were, always sailors that were passing through New York. And it ended up serving the same purpose as rooming houses, because I mean, just because you call it something different doesn't mean that the purpose it serves is going to be any different. Like people see rooms, they're going to take the rooms.
And
Um,
I'm gonna throw it way back real quick to when we talked about San Francisco a little bit, a couple episodes, whenever that
oh
was.
yeah. Hmm.
Um, Same deal. After the First World War, they set up these like bars that would specifically be for like sailormen, men in uniform, and now we have leather daddies and like a gay uniform, and that's exactly where that came from. So, just little
Yeah.
fun facts like that.
Honestly, fucking seamen, the Navy, the military, some of the gayest shit. But
Because you're drafting
we could
these
do
at this time boys at the like their sexual peak, and they're in same-sex
usually
facilities.
virgins.
Yeah,
Yeah.
oftentimes virgins. And then at the same
They're
time,
gonna touch
now
peepees.
now women are in the workforce in a same-sex environment for the first time. It all worked out.
You know what? It really did.
Yeah. So tell us about the Mills houses.
Yeah, so there were a couple Mills houses, and actually, when I was doing my research, I found a third one. But
Nice.
because it wasn't included on the notes, I don't know if it was really significant. Um,
I don't know.
but there are two Mills houses to be highlighted. Um, one was on Bleecker Street in New York, and one was on Rivington Street, and they were specifically for unmarried workers, which to me is like I don't know. That seems like a very posh name for like a sex den. I don't know if that's what it turned into, but like you have a bunch of like sad, single, probably horny people in a building together.
Well, I mean
You
yeah.
might want to get it fumigated.
Yeah. I mean
um,
that's the whole idea is like that these are usually men like 18 to like 25, often not married, sometimes have left family overseas. So like loneliness ensues.
yep. And like Carolyn said, because census records weren't really a thing, and even if they were, it wouldn't really matter because of the transient nature of a lot of these establishments. Um, we only really
Yeah, I
know
think we
how
have like
popular these.
sorry, yeah, I think we have like census estimates, maybe even retroactively, but yeah, like you said, certainly not for gay things for that long.
Yeah, because we all just like to turn the other cheek, like Jesus said. But we know that these were really popular gay locations, because of the homosexual crime reports and police records or sorry, arrest records from these locations, which I think is really interesting. It's like I don't know. That's a tangent, but
Yeah, so you would get
just
arrested
kind of
for like
interesting to think about.
cross-dressing or for like God forbid being caught with another man, but that's kind of the extreme version. I mean, anything like having long hair, things like that, uh can get you arrested for homo
It's fucking
behavior.
wild,
Yeah.
draconian. Yeah. Um, So, as the village people said, we love to stay at the YMCA, and that was that was also a player in this housing situation. They used to have a few residential hotels and dormitories that started to go up around 1896, late 1800s. And by World War One, so from around 1914 to about 1918, it actually had a gay reputation. And if you've seen the music video for YMCA, it all tracks. Those fucking mustaches, man. I swear to God. Um, Two of which that were built during the Depression were the Sloan House, which was located on West 34th and Ninth, and that had about 1,500 rooms. And then there was the West Side YMCA, which was on 63rd and Central Park. Um, yeah, just gay people hanging out in these houses together. What could go wrong? Hilarity ensues,
Already
and
answers.
also
Yep.
probably a lot of STDs.
Well, this is we have already done an episode on the AIDS crisis, so we do know how that worked out. Anyway,
Yep.
the reason I wanted to talk about these like lodging houses that is that I kind of feel like it's a precursor to what we see in the late 60s, but really the 70s with well, I guess 60s, early 70s, with drag houses. Uh,
Mm. Hmm.
yeah, which we'll talk about that time period another time, I suppose. But
It's the
that's
historical roots of the found family.
right, yeah. But it's also to talk about the fact that the drag house uh structure is separate from the history of drag balls, which is our next topic. So we're going to talk about the masquerade and the civil ball of the Hamilton Lodge, which may sound familiar. It's um, probably the first drag ball and also the most famous. So the Hamilton Lodge was a black fraternal organization and a social group who held masquerade balls in Harlem in the 30s. Um, so the first one was held in 1869 with no homosexual intentions, but it gave the opportunity for people to cross dress and, as one author put it, volunteer as the entertainment. I think that was from a newspaper clipping. I'll have to find it and cite my sources. Uh, who knows if it's that or just like this is an excuse to cross dress because I'll have a full mask on. Um,
I mean
so it
that, but also
was
like if
originally
you
held.
if you get drunk enough, like think about the theater kids and the Broadway girlies. When they get drunk enough, they also volunteer to perform. Sometimes you just need an audience.
I guess so. It was originally held at the Rockland Palace at 280 Frederick Douglass Avenue at the corner of 15th Street. At one point, it was held at the St. Nicholas Palace downtown, the Renaissance Unique Ballroom and Casino. Um, by the mid 20s, sort of at the height of Prohibition, up to 7,000 patrons were going to these bars. So, like, they were extremely popular, like, extremely public. And these drag bars just start popping up around the same time, specifically in the Bowery, which we talked about, along
Hmm.
Bowery Street. It was kind of known for being more impoverished area of town with a lot of hustlers. But it's also where punk rock was birthed. And so it's also the most important area of New York. We can talk about CBGB another time, but right now, Bowery's popping up with drag bars along with the Levy district of South Side Chicago. Uh, and we're starting to see the first lesbian enclaves start popping up in Harlem and in the Village. So here we are, roaring 20s, prosperous times, and loose morals, and alcohol is illegal. So we have to go underground. So we're being exposed to other illegal things like gay sex and drag. Um, so what that is referred to is the pansy craze. People just can't get enough of those horticultural lads.
Oh,
The the
love
straights want
them.
to gotta love them. The straights want to party. The gays want to congregate. It provides a convenient cover, similar to how Times Square is the theater district and Greenwich Village was the boho district. So that was kind of a convenient cover for gays. Like there was one quote about like even the most extravagant gay doesn't stand out in Times Square, right? Because there's just so many
Still true today.
insane things happening. Uh, so middle and high class gays congregate with the straights. Um, and so we even now start to see the interesting dichotomy of sort of white upper middle class gays versus like immigrant worker gays, um, who are partying in the same places but not with the same people. Um, so the stories of these parties at the speakeasies and saloons and dance halls and honky tonks, they'll make it into the paper and later into the radio, and so of course that causes other people to be aware of the scene. Uh, 1929, October 29th, I think. Black Friday, the stock market crashes, and then we're in a depression until 1941, at which point we are still in a world war. So, like, not great times. And this, of course, makes it an easy scapegoat for moralists.
Yeah, speaking of depression, my dad told me that we're supposed to be on the verge of another one of those right now, which is super great.
Well,
Um, yeah. Uh,
please,
but
let's not.
hopefully, we won't have to deal with prohibition uh during this upcoming grand fuckery,
I don't think they will
whatever.
ever make booze illegal again.
So
Anyway, Max is going to tell us more about prohibition, which we sort of talked about last time, but I think it's important to go over again. Um, just kind of the story of how that affected nightlife. So take it away.
Yeah, so despite the fact that in the Roaring 20s, everyone was feeling this, I don't know, this grand joie de vivre, and everyone was
Hmm.
absolutely losing their mind and like just fucking partying. This was also the time of prohibition, which I don't know if they realized when they made alcohol illegal, just how the effects of that would just ripple out
Yep.
forever. Um, but so
Forever.
they really, 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 really fucked up, and they were like, you know what? That good juice that we love, that yummy stuff, it's bad actually, and we're gonna make it illegal. And so they did. Um, and that was in the early 20s, from January of 1920, so literally, day one, and lasted all the way until December of 1933, so 13 years with alcohol being federally illegal, which honestly kind of spurred a culture of its own with speakeasies and rum runners, all
White
that.
lightning. Moonshine.
Moonshine, yep. Um, which actually, I am Southern. However, I did not have my first taste of moonshine until Christmas last year.
I love it. It's
Horrible,
very
horrible
pigmented.
stuff.
Okay. Well, thank
I
God
mean,
I'm a
honestly,
country
just
girl. Uh,
just grab a bottle of isopropyl alcohol. It's the same shit.
fuck off.
So, during Prohibition, a lot of culture moved underground, not just alcohol culture, but like party culture and um, basically,
Music and
I don't want to say
everything
that.
fun.
Yeah, I don't want to say that everything fun is tied to alcohol, but the fact that it did all kind of move underground at the same time, I don't know. Just a coincidence, I guess. But yeah,
Fun is
everything
tied to dancing.
true, which is sinful. Um, and so everything moved underground, and that obviously, includes speakeasies and bars and things like that. But it also means that people who were not directly involved in gay life then became exposed to it because the gay party culture moved underground with everything else, and so did the straight party culture. And so at a certain point, if you knew there was a party happening, if you knew there were going to be drinks there, you were going to show up. And so it was going to expose you to things that you might not have been um, at other points in your life when the good juice was legal. And so alliances started to happen in the underground between, I don't know, what would you say?
I
Just
don't
different like run
alliances of
runners, different
I don't know. Alliance of
club
the Underground is
organizers.
just like a phrase that I read, and I like to use it a lot on this podcast because I think it just accurately describes how like there's a community of people who sort of have loyalty to each other because they're in the same sort of socioeconomic situation, even if it's not because of the same
Mhm.
reason. So like if you're a hustler versus um like a exotic pharmacist, if you know what I mean. Uh
Well, so like underground crime circles always existed, but prohibition is interesting because like alcohol had been legal for all of humanity, and now all of a sudden regular people kind of became criminals, despite the fact that they, you know, really just wanted that good juice. Um, and so you meet people, you build connections, you're exposed to things that you wouldn't normally be. It's kind of interesting. Don't think that alcohol ever should have been illegalized, but just interesting things came from it. Um, so anyway, fast forward to 1933, mid 1930s, prohibition ends, and then officials and law enforcement begin to crack down on general debauchery, which they used as an excuse basically to crack down on gay behavior. Because now that I guess the moralists had switched directions, or at least they realized that alcohol wasn't all that bad. They still wanted someone to be mad at, and unfortunately, that group was either black people, immigrants, or gay people, and so they had, just like now, they had to use whatever means they could within the law um, to persecute those they wanted to persecute. Tale as old as time, unfortunately, and so this included different efforts such as no liquor licenses for gay bars, no dancing with the same sex, As Carolyn mentioned earlier, you could be fined or arrested for cross dressing, or if your hair was too long. It was really, really bizarre. But that's how they made it work. Um, so as a result of that, liquor was only allowed to be served in quote ordinary places,
Orderly
which
places.
seems orderly places. My bad, which seems vague, because that's what even does that mean?
Well,
But
because then you can make it whatever you want.
exactly, yeah, except for gay bars. Um, so as a whole, even though the community had already gone underground with prohibition, they were forced to remain there and go into hiding, even in these historically gay neighborhoods. And it was just a very panicked reaction to by quote orderly people, I guess, or the moralists. They were just panicked to see how open and accepted gay life and gay culture had become during prohibition, since everyone was mingling together, and so they needed to shut it down. They wanted to shut it down. Although I will say this was before the term homosexual was included in the Bible, because that was not until the 40s. But there was still fear of gay people, I guess, because we're cooler than them and they felt threatened.
Yeah, not all
Um,
homophobia comes from the Bible. Don't worry, there's plenty of kinds out there.
Yep. Yep. Don't lose
And
any sleep about it. It's
a lot of it is sometimes not even necessarily homophobia. It's just like essentialist gender roles and misogyny, but also homophobia. So
and I mean, and just like moralistic issues. Like a lot of times the people in power just thought that it wasn't necessarily a homophobia thing, but like the acts and the culture that arose from this community didn't fit with the morals that they felt everyone should abide by. And unfortunately it, you know, led them to persecute the whole group, but you know, not that it makes it better, just because it wasn't capital H homophobia. Anyway, it also became illegal at this time to show gay characters in film. And then drag balls had to really shrink in scale. They couldn't be, I mean, don't get me wrong, it was still very much like a big loud party. But they weren't as I guess respected as they had been before. They weren't maybe as popular. Um, and they were also more segregated. And I believe it was around this time that we started to see a separation from black drag balls and white drag balls, because, and I think we talked about this in one of our earlier episodes, a lot of gay history was not really intersectional in terms of race. I mean, there were, aspects where it overlapped, but there was still a lot of gay racism, and there still is today. But it wasn't, white gays and black gays sitting together and being like, hey, we both got, something in common, we're going to be friends. No, the racism thing was still very much there, unfortunately. And so as a result of everything kind of going underground, a lot of private parties started to show up. And so obviously, like I said, there were the balls, but then there were also just parties in people's apartments. And one of the most famous hostesses of these private parties was a woman named Alayla Walker. She was a businesswoman, a patron of the arts, and a daughter of Madam C.J. Walker. She herself was not gay, at least not admittedly so. But she was like a mother of the gays, very fierce ally, and through these parties to be a safe space for gay people, specifically those that were, um, you know, feeling endangered during their day to day lives and needed a place to get away.
and you know what? Actually,
And the
I don't even know if that's like really accurate. I know I wrote that, but I don't know that it's fully accurate that she threw it as a safe haven for gays. More just that like she threw parties because this was an extravagant and generous woman who loved to party, and it became a safe haven for gays because there was no like restrictions on who could come in. So,
Well, I like to believe
yeah.
she was like a gay mom, but
Well,
I don't know all the facts.
she
I
might
wasn't
have been.
there.
I don't yeah, exactly.
Um, But, they were so these parties that she threw were so, exclusive and so popular that even sometimes celebrities would make appearances, and the cool thing about this is it was just a townhouse. It was just, I mean, she ended up buying one townhouse beside the other, so it kind of became bigger. Um, but it's not like this was a club. It wasn't some fancy bar or anything. It was just this woman's house. She just
Yeah.
liked to have a good time,
Yeah.
and you know
And
what? Fucking love that.
yeah, and she eventually like created like a studio on one of the floors, and like one of the floors she ended up making it like a membership private club type thing. So
Hmm.
yeah,
The Dark
she really made the
Tower.
most
Yep.
of it. The Dark Tower. Yes.
Which love that name. Um,
Very dramatic.
and so when you're throwing parties in apartments, uh, you kind of have to. I mean, there are different factors that you need to think about. Like this is your house, but also if you're comfortable with having a lot of people over at your house, and if you have a bunch of people that want to come to these parties and get away, that's a great fucking way to make rent money. And so some of these parties were called rent parties because they would be thrown on the last day of the month, or maybe just a couple days before the last day of the month. Um, and there would be admission that would be charged that would go directly to the host, uh, so that they could pay their landlord the next day, which I think is kind of fierce.
Yeah, that's the idea is like at the end of the party you have enough money and you take the money and go pay the landlady.
Yep. Um,
Yeah.
would love to do that, but I live in a hotel room called a studio now, so can't really do that. I also
Yeah.
don't like people, so it's fine. Um, then there was another type of independent, more private party called a buffet flat, or just generally buffet flats. And these were certain black speakeasies and brothels, because you could get booze, you get sex, you get weed. Um, and it was usually in an apartment for private sake, but it was called a buffet flat because you could kind of get whatever you want, take a little bit of everything. Um, there were an estimated 10,000 of these buffet flats throughout Manhattan and Brooklyn during the height of Prohibition in 1927. Um, and it says some functioned as banks for Pullman train porters who made a lot of money but couldn't invest it anywhere. Which could you
Okay.
elaborate on that? Because I don't.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you asked me to because actually this part was super cool. Okay, so after the Great Migration, so uh fucking what's his name? JS Pullman or something. He specifically wanted to hire formerly enslaved people.
Hmm.
Um and so this was like one of the best ways for formerly enslaved black people to make money. So and they were like like traveling train porters, like flight attendants sort of, I think, for
Hmm. Yeah.
long trains. Um so these people were making good money, but they weren't allowed to put it in the banks because the banks wouldn't take black people's money. And so instead of uh so that, and then just instead of just carrying it with them on their pockets, they would leave it with the people at the buffet flat. So they would leave their, however their month's paycheck with the um words help
Host.
host, thank you, um host, or like whoever was living there, uh and then like the host could kind of lend it out a little bit, make some interest, and then when the Pullman train porter comes back through town, um he can pick up his money again. So like they're literally functioning as just small banks,
That's super fucking cool.
which I think is just so interesting. I really want to look more into that because I just thought that was like the coolest little fact.
Allies of the underground,
Yes.
pretty much.
Anything else you want to add before I start this last section?
No, other than just I don't know. I've said it before, but just like gays love to party and gays look out for each other. I mean, okay, maybe I won't say gays look out for each other because a lot of times they don't. But it is this whole idea of
It's nice when they do.
it is, yeah, and this whole idea of allies of the underground, which I know that you said is just a term that you read, but it's like it really does kind of I don't know. It's really significant and it's really interesting to think about because when you put a bunch of people in the same situation who wouldn't ordinarily interact with each other or, who all have one foundational thing in common, especially one that they're all persecuted for or, something that's maybe illegal, it's just interesting to see what kind of culture and what practices come from that, like these,
Yeah.
little bank situations or these buffet flats, these apartment parties. It's just, I don't know. It's really
Yeah.
cool.
I know, I love it. Okay, so the last part we're going to talk about is kind of has been happening for this whole time. So like all of this has been happening under the Harlem Renaissance, which lasted about 1918 to 1930s or so. Basically, the Depression ended it. Um, and so think back to your like elementary school history class. The Harlem Renaissance was just referring to the fact that after the Great Migration, plenty of black artists, writers, poets, musicians uh, ended up in Harlem and made beautiful music and influenced each other. And it was also a great bastion for gay culture. Um, One of my favorite parts of this is dirty blues. Um, I think that we as a society don't listen to the blues enough, and I think we'd be a lot better off if we did. But anyway, uh,
Carolyn's gonna start her
it
own
was
music podcast one of these days. Y'all just wait.
please no, I don't need to give myself something else to do. Um, so uh, it was almost normal within the Harlem music scene for women to express same-sex attraction in their performances. For one thing, the blues was like very, very sexual at this time. And one of my favorite examples of that is this song. I think her name is Ida Cox or something. It's I'm a 1 hour mama, so no 1 minute papa ain't the kind of man for me. Set your
Ooh,
alarm clock, Papa, 1 hour, that's proper. Love me like I like to be. I may want love for one
I can
hour, then
tell him.
decide to make it two. Takes an hour before I get started, maybe three, four, I'm through. um,
Hell
anyway, so
yeah.
lots of great sexy songs coming out during this time. Anyway, some of the most recognizable names in this particular scene are, of course, Ma Rainey. This is the mother of the blues, and she really bridged the gap between vaudeville and the blues. Um, she particularly had this song called "Prove It on Me Blues," which is about her being a lesbian. Uh, but she was basically like, "Okay, prove it on me." And this ended up being like super influential for Melissa Etheridge and kind of like the wave of pro lesbian music we ended up getting. So, Ma Rainey, the mother of the blues. Then we also have Bessie Smith, the empress of the blues. And then we have Lucille Bogan, who also went by just Bessie Jackson, who wrote the Bull Dyke Blues. So, even from a non-gay perspective, there were still songs being written about gay relationships just from like an observational standpoint. Like there was this one song called "The Boy in the Boat" by George Hanna, and it was just like talking about gay people, but he wasn't gay, and it wasn't like his own experience. It was just like writing a song about any other subject.
Well, and
Um,
it wasn't just music too. I mean, obviously the Harlem Renaissance is well, I would say probably most well known for the music that came out of it. Um, but I mean, there was it was just a whole. I mean, it was called a Renaissance for a reason. It was a whole cultural rebirth of art and culture that we respect now, but at that time it was still very underground. And correct me if I'm wrong, but Langston Hughes was
yeah,
during this time, right? And he was a
that's exactly right.
gay poet, um, a black gay poet, and there's a lot
Not
of
con
there's actually a lot of
I don't think he ever like announced himself as gay. I think it's just people it's like Walt Whitman where we're just like gathering it from his white writing.
oh
So,
yeah,
you know.
I mean, we're just now in the last like 20 years or so getting really into mainstream discourse of the intersectionality of being black and queer, but it's like
Well,
this it you can't
I don't know if that's
I don't know.
accurate, but
Well, I don't know.
black
But
feminism I
it's
think has been
just
around since like the 60s, so.
oh yeah, for sure, but it's like I mean, I don't know. You hear about I don't know, that's another episode and I'm white, so I'm not gonna, pretend to know anything on that. Um just watch a lot of TikToks. But it's like
Please read a book.
you can't I can't read. Um fuck, you can't just like I don't know. It was such a rich time and there's so many different aspects of these different cultures that go into it that it's not, just gay, it's not just black. It was just this blooming of culture that I don't know, we I feel like we still feel it today.
Yes. Um, yeah, no, we
I don't know
absolutely
if I
still feel
actually
the
said
influence.
anything just now, but
That's okay, just
I
musing.
can't really.
That's okay.
Yeah, I'm just
Um,
musing. I can't really sort out my brain, but it's like, you know?
yeah. I mean, it was just a really open time for people to, especially women, to subvert gender norms specifically. Like, there was this one
Mhm.
person, and maybe some people have heard this name before. Gladys Bentley was a blues singer and a pianist from Philadelphia. She's got this contralto voice like Cher, so very like low and sexy and beautiful. Um, she was this black lesbian cross-dressing performer who came to fame by performing at Harry Hansberry's Clam House when they needed a quote male pianist, and so she just started cross-dressing. Uh, and she was so well renowned, and like her shows were so well attended, and she would just do this thing where she was like completely dressed like a man and really masculine, but then she would also be like really like sexy like with the men. um so it
Gender
was,
bends.
yeah, just like funny fun stuff. So the club was actually renamed after her eventually, called Barbara's, after her stage name, which was Bobby Menton. So other notable names in the scene were Ethel Waters, which I found out is like a great great aunt of Crystal Waters, who is the person who did that song that's like run it back to the middle and around again. I'm gonna be there till the end,
Hmm,
100% pure
interesting.
love. Anyway, uh, so Josephine Baker, of course, Alberta Hunter, and then Jackie Moms Mabley, who I wanted to bring up because she's around. She's from just down the road. She's from Brevard.
Oh, really?
She was just one of the first. Yeah, she's just one of the first openly gay comedians who came out in 1921. Also, like all of these
I was just in
people,
Brevard.
nice. Yeah, all of these people I've mentioned, like none of these people are from New York. They're from like Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Carolina,
The South.
Philadelphia, yeah, Kentucky. Um, not that Philadelphia is not the South, but other than that.
Well,
Um, but anyway, so like again, for privacy's sake, they would start these speakeasies that people specifically would go to because there's no doorman. And so you have these like underground jazz clubs sort of that are actually just parties at somebody's house, but you can actually just kind of like slip in unseen in the middle of the night. Um, and then a lot of these drag balls were happening at like 4 in the morning after everybody else, like after the nightlife workers had gotten off work and everybody else had gone home, and it was like safe to be out. So like as much as we're talking about how like gay culture was blooming, like it's still not they're still not allowed to be like openly gay. And it's so weird because the way it sounds like gay life was everywhere and it's great, but like it was not safe. It was not good times. Just good things were happening, but it wasn't like,
it was everywhere, but it was still secret.
yeah. So
It was still gay
so
life versus straight life.
anyway, that's what I have for you today. Next time we get around to recording a podcast, we will talk about World War One, as well as, yeah, no, mostly that up to maybe Korea, 1950s. We'll see how I feel. But that's all I have. Do you have any other commentary you would like to add, Max?
It's just it is so interesting to me. It's like the butterfly effect, you know? It's like if prohibition had never happened,
Oh my god, I know.
like the music and the culture that we have today would probably be a lot different. And it's not just related to alcohol. It's because like prohibition was this domino, and then another domino was these underground cultures, and then another domino was what that did to gay culture, what that did to black culture, and then another domino is um what arose from that time and the period following that, um and then the wars too. It's just like how each one of these events affects the other, and how I don't know if any of those. would have happened the way that they did if so much culture had not been forced to go underground with alcohol during the time of prohibition. It's like, and I mean, obviously prohibition is not the only factor at play here. There's a lot of other things that happened throughout history that,
We're
drove
also just
events the way
yeah,
that
we're
they
also
went.
just
But
talking about, like, one city. This is, like, just America,
mhm.
one part of America. So, like, there is something completely different happening in Berlin, you know? But I don't
Mm.
know shit
It
about
like
Berlin.
It almost it almost makes me wanna become, like, a history major. I say I'm not in college, but, like, you know what I mean? Like, it almost makes me wanna, 'cause I understand the enthusiasm that people who study history and, academic historians, people like that, I understand the enthusiasm they have because it's like, it's not just a boring fact or a certain date. It's like, you don't understand. It's this one thing happened, and then as a result of that, 10 other things happen, and as a result of those 10 things, 10 other things happen, and it's like, to be able to have such a clear understanding of the way that we got from, like, point A to, you know, point M or wherever the fuck we're at is like, oh, it's just so interesting, and of course, it's more interesting when it's, gay because gay history isn't taught in schools, and, this is a lot of history that we
Yeah.
don't learn, but
But also, like
god damn.
somebody from a different mindset than me would probably, like, take these events and, um, draw completely different conclusions based on completely different, uh, like, ideology background that they have, and that's sort of just, like, the nature of arguing. Um,
Mhm.
so not to get too but yeah, no, I know what you mean. It's a shame they make it so boring in public school because, like, history can be really interesting to learn when your public school actually gets past, like, 1900.
It's also a shame that they I mean, let me not get on this soapbox, but, like, the fact that we're not taught gay history and black history and marginalized histories like that when they have shaped the lives that we live today is, like, bizarre to me,
A
It's like,
fun fact is that in kindergarten we celebrated Black History Month and everybody had to learn about a important figure from Black history, and I was assigned Althea Gibson, who was the first Black professional tennis player.
nice.
Nice. That's
Okay,
all.
well, tell me it's been a while,
Oh
tell me
god.
what you're into.
Um what am I into? Oh my god, I haven't really been, like, watching or reading or listening to anything because I've been kind of traveling a lot. Um I've still been listening
You're
to
into
that normal.
Dollywood, I know
Yes,
that.
well, yeah. So, yeah, I went to Dollywood with my sister and it was really fun. And I love that theme park. It's the best theme park ever. Also, I faced my fears. I've never gone upside down on a roller coaster before, and did go upside down on a roller coaster. So, that
It's
was
kinda
very,
wild shit.
very brave of me. Um, so yes, of course, into Dolly Parton, always. Um, I literally don't even have an answer. Yeah. I'm into racking up those hotel and airline reward points. What are you into?
Um, I'm into a lot of things. It's been a while, and I've just been like jotting them down whenever I think of something. So first, the memes and the way that Twitter exploded when the Queen died, some of the funniest shit I have ever seen.
Let me not go to
So,
hell.
so I'm into that for sure. Um, I'm also into this band called Better Love. Um, they've got an interesting sound. I feel like every week into some new band that I want to plug, but I don't know. They've got a sound that very much appeals to me because some of it there's like a indie synth pop vibe to it, but then other times it's like kind of reminiscent of like 2008 pop punk. Um, it's a very interesting brand, and it I don't know. I like them a lot. Um, I am also into The Sandman on Netflix. I finally got around to watching that. I watched it on my flights,
Mr. Sandman,
pretty much. Um,
bring me a
Homeboy,
dream.
first of all, it's a
Make him the
Neil
cutest
Gaiman work, so like I
thing
knew it
ever
was going to be incredible.
seen.
Um,
Give him two
but
lips
also
of roses
Homeboy's
and
vibe
clover,
is just like
and hoping that his lonely nights are over.
you having fun.
I'm done. I had to finish the verse.
um, Homeboy, I mean, it's like I said, it's gaming, so it's incredible. But like Homeboy's vibe, the guy that plays the Sandman, I don't remember his name. Um, but there's like there are layers to his character that I really appreciate because he's like intense and can come off as cruel, but he also has this like softness to him. I don't know. It's like it's very good. Um, you should definitely watch it if you haven't yet. Um, Additionally, I'm into Be Real. Carolyn, I don't think you're on Be Real, but it's a lot of fun. And
Oh,
it
my
actually,
friend has that. I know what that is.
so it's fun because it's like I don't know. We talked to several episodes ago about seeing Instagram and its baby stages. And so being on a social media app now, I don't know if it's going to take off. I don't know if it's going to become the next big thing. It seems to be pretty popular right now, which is kind of cool. But it like it is just cool to see, a social media app in their baby phases because and most importantly, there are no ads, which I love.
Ugh,
It is
love
kind of
that.
mid right now because like not that many people are on it, and there's just two tabs. There's like your friends and then discover. Um, but it's like I like it for a lot of the same reasons that I like TikTok because it's like very much a slice of life type thing. You can just see what, people around the world are up to. Um, because the concept is really cool. You get the notification, you take a picture of whatever it is you're doing, and that's it. I guess you could stage it if you want, but it's hard to predict. Um, and you also can't like scroll unless you like post your own. So I don't know, it's cool. So that's what I'm into. And then last thing, what are your little victories?
Shit. I got roadside assistance to show up after 4.5 hours
That's
because
good.
I had a goddamn, I have a damn slow leak in my tire, and I knew about it. I knew about it, and I was like, I'll take it to the mechanic in the morning. And I came out in this morning, and it was completely flat. And I don't like. There's nowhere close enough to even think about trying to ride on the flat tire. Like, no way. I don't have a tire jack, so I had to call fucking roadside assistance. In the time it took, I could have walked to the store, bought a tire jack, walked back, fixed my tire, walked back, returned the tire jack, and walked back to my house, and then took a 3-hour nap in the time that it took them to
You
show
know what you
up.
should invest in
Um,
is
that's not a victory. What am I talking
you
about?
should invest in those. I've got one of these, and then I got Eli one of these for I think Hanukkah last year because he was so into it. But portable air compressors. You can just plug them into the yeah,
Yeah. No, I immediately looked
yeah,
them up. Looks like there's some basic ones available for like
yeah. They're not
$30,
expensive.
and that will be a very soon purchase for me. Um that was not a victory. What is a victory is that because I had a flat tire, or like that I because I knew that I had a slow leak, I've been driving less and walking more, so that's
Okay,
always
there you
nice.
go.
What about you?
Um, my little victories are both moving related. I
That it's over?
Yes. So first of all, I am a very sentimental person. And so I always get pretty emotional when I like leave an apartment, even if I've hated it, just because I don't know, there's like all your essence is in that one space for a certain amount of time, and then like leaving it,
Same.
it's just, it's difficult for me. Um, but I left my first ever apartment in Seattle about a month ago, and I did not cry the day of. I did cry beforehand, but I did not cry the day of. Like when I, took my last look around and left the keys on the counter or whatever. And that's normally like when you look back. Katya said this on one time. Looking into an empty apartment is chilling, and it totally fucking is because
Yeah, I
when
hate
you
it.
take that last look, like it is just such a visceral, like, bad, gross feeling. Um, but I don't know if it's because I was being productive or if it's because I had a lot of other shit going on, but I did my whole grieving process like beforehand. And maybe it's because I procrastinated things so much, but it's like we literally left the apartment at like basically the last possible minute. Um, like we were supposed to be out by September 1st, and we finished cleaning like 10 p.m. September 30th, or August 31st, whatever. Um,
Horrible.
but I think because of that though, I was so focused on, okay, let's get this done. Let's go. We gotta go. We gotta go. Um, I did not cry, so I was proud of myself. Um, and
Nice.
then yeah, it was a short time span. I moved apartments in
Tip for
like,
not feeling feelings, just distract yourself at all times.
okay, that is not advice I would give to anyone else, but for me, I felt good about it. And then yeah, we did not I don't even think we packed a single box until like a week before we were supposed to move, and then we got it all done in the span of like a week or two. Of course, my moving
That's insane.
story turned out to be a lot worse and a lot more stressful, but you know what? Other little victory, I'm still here and it's all done.
It's
It
over. It's
is
all done.
over. Yep,
I'm still
pretty
standing.
much.
Yeah, yeah,
All
yeah.
right, well, do you have anything else for us, Carolyn?
Nope, that's it.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for listening, for those of you that have, and thank you for your patience.
Mhm.
If I could have controlled the circumstances in any way, it would not have been this long of a break. But literally everything that could have went wrong. Um, so what?
Real quick, I forgot about my biggest victory of all because it's kind of been a while.
Oh yeah, share.
I went to Washington, D.C. with my dad to see The Damned open for Blondie.
Oh yeah, I saw your story. You were
That
living.
show was fucking it was incredible. You know, sometimes you see these legacy bands and it's like, okay, they're old people, fine, whatever. Like, this show was so good. The venue was so perfect. Debbie Harry, Klemberg, like, this show was perfect. I will never recover. I haven't had post-concert depression in a very long time, but, like, wow. It really stuck with me. I was watching the videos for days. That was an amazing concert. Everybody should go listen to The Damned. They put out the first punk single in the UK in 1974. It was before even Patti Smith put out Horses. Anyway,
Well, I'm
that's it.
glad that you had a great time because when I worked a Blondie concert, Debbie Harry was not really there, even though she was there. It was pretty rough, but I'm glad you had a good time.
She's also just that's also kind of like her performance style. So there could have been something lost in translation, perhaps.
True, yeah. I was never a big Blondie fan.
She's very like cannot relate to that statement, but fine.
I just wasn't really
I guess I can
exposed
move
to it.
past it. Anyway,
Anyway, thank you all so much for listening and for your patience. We very much appreciate it. And if you have enjoyed what you've heard, or if you are looking forward to new content, please be sure to follow us on social media. You can find us on Instagram at Mutable Immutables. You can find us on Twitter at Immutables Pod. You can also find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. And we also do put the podcast up on YouTube. And the user is also Mutable Immutables. It's been a while since I've done this, so if I'm forgetting anything, I apologize. But yeah, it's great to be back. It's great to be done with all of this moving nonsense, and I'm very much looking forward to learning more about fucking gay history. It's becoming very interesting. I love it.
and and as the Tom Robinson band once said, sing if you're glad to be gay, sing if you're happy that way. Hey.
Yep, very that. Okay.
That's
All
it.
right. Thank y'all so much. Bye.
Bye.